We were always looking for
okay.
we had big these are
The oob.
yeah, we had where's the oob report,
Pat Phillips, thank you so much for coming in and meeting with us today and sitting down for an interview.
You're welcome, and I really welcome things like this because it's really how people can get to know a little bit of me is by seeing on video, me answering questions, talking about my background. So I appreciate you having me.
Well, I feel like we're in the digital age. There's so much on social media, and so often people go to vote and they don't know who these candidates are.
That's a big pet peeve of mine because I remember people. I just went in and pushed buttons,
Right.
and that's how you validate your freedom is by voting, right? If you're going to yell, get mad, I don't care where you sit politically. If you don't vote, you shouldn't talk, right? So, and if you're going to vote, you should do your homework.
Yeah.
It's vital. There have been times when I was younger, in particular, if I didn't do my homework on a particular candidate, a particular post, I would leave that one blank. Because
Really?
I think it's unfair. If I'm just throwing a dart at a dartboard, I don't think that's fair to myself as a voter or to the people in the community.
Yeah. I've heard so many different stories. Like, I like this person's last name, or this person lives near me, and so I picked that one, or one of my other favorites. They had more signs.
Sometimes it does get down. I like the colors of the signs.
Yes, that was a good color scheme.
I think for signs in particular, there's a strategy to signs, but you want your name to pop.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure that they're strategically placed with traffic and things like that.
Yeah.
So I find that fascinating because I'm a history, science, math geek. That there's always a reason for this, and and figuring that out is always fascinating to me.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so you're running for controller.
Controller, yeah.
All right, so controller is a super interesting race this year for Washington County because there's 4 different candidates running for one space. 4 different Republicans, I should say, for the primary.
And probably a low voter turnout year being the year after a presidential election, so.
Yeah, and that's always the challenge is getting people out on these municipal elections. They don't realize, I think, often how much these local positions really affect your life.
Yeah, and I kind of look at it like there's a domino effect, rolling its way upward, from local to county to state and whatnot. But for some reason, I think people get enamored with federal elections because everyone in the country's on board to one side or another, where they think, if I don't vote for a borough, councilman, it's not that big of a deal. But it is a big deal, especially with the changing landscape, in Washington County, where 10 years ago it was very blue and now it's very red, but you still have bastions of areas that are blue where red is creeping in. So it's like I said, the geek in me finds it very, very interesting.
Well, I'm with you. I mean, watching the transformation of Washington County, particularly these last 20 years, it's just been remarkable.
Really, really, when I was a kid, no one would have envisioned that, because it was so set one way. But times have changed too with, you think Washington County was primarily Union Democrats, and now when you look at Union Democrats, they're moderate Republicans.
Right.
And it's the landscape, and if you look how presidencies in particular have changed the landscape of voting, just trying to get votes, and then it changes a whole dynamic of the whole country. That's really, it amazes me.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talked about, growing up. So have you grown up, are you a long-time Washington?
Oh yeah, I have spent, I guess you could say I'm a lifelong Washington County resident. Okay. But my life and professional background, I've traveled a lot. Okay. And I guess, a great way to segue into my background and career. So
please.
Going way, way back, I graduated from Washington Jefferson College. I'm a very, very proud president.
Okay.
It's like whenever you turn in a resume and someone says, you went to W&J, I'm like, oh yeah, kind of gets you a couple extra moments in the interview process.
Okay.
And I'm really proud of that because it's a great school. From there I went on, I worked for 3 Fortune 500 companies. I worked for Mellon, I worked for PNC, and I worked for Fiserv. Fiserv being the premier provider of banking and financial systems to most financial institutions in the country. That could be mortgage companies, to retail banking, to stocks. Fiserv covers that gamut. Where I started with Mellon was just basically opening checking accounts, and booking loans. From that, I would get called to audit tellers. So my experience in auditing started many, many moons ago. Okay. And I jokingly say the word, and I've said this in another interview, OOB. Everyone says, "What's OOB?" That means out of balance. So we were always looking for out. We had big these are the OOB. Yeah, we had where's the OOB report? So it's always checks and balances. From there, I got more into the system side where I was still doing a lot of auditing, but I was also speccing new designs for retail lending systems, mortgage systems, things like that. Oh, and then when I went to PNC, it was more database work, but once again, auditing the database. So I think in life we're always auditing. We're checking ourselves, to make sure we're staying in our boundaries, we're not crossing any lines. And I think it's a good process to audit yourself. From PNC, that's when Fiserv had called me, and I went to work there. And what an amazing company Fiserv is. When I was doing work there, I started to travel, and one day I was talking to the CEO, and I said, we're missing compliance. And all of a sudden, I came into work, and I was told I'm the new regulatory guy. Oh. So the next thing is I'm giving speeches on banking regulations and how to stay in compliance. Wow. So it's all there's a pattern developing here to what I've done, and I actually worked for Fiserv twice. I had a job offer for EDMC Education Management, which was down in downtown Pittsburgh. They owned all the art institutes. They owned Brown Mackie College. I don't believe they're in existence anymore because when the education bubble burst, there was a lot going on there. But I did go back to Fiserv for several years, primarily focusing on mortgages and the education side, going out with a crew. Basically, someone wanted the product, we would go in, do the conversion, but that involved education, that involved auditing, that involved showing them how to balance the system. So like I said, the audit part has followed me all along. It's always in there, and it's almost automatic in my head. I'm driving down the street, I'm going, well, that doesn't look like it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. I'm kind of auditing, I don't think girlfriends have liked that over the years.
Okay, so not married?
I am not married. I've had some wonderful relationships, but I'm a very, very proud uncle of 4 nieces. So
very good.
They make me super proud.
Very good, very good. So family man at heart.
I am a family man. I believe that you try to find the good in people. I believe that you work with people they make you better, you make them better. And that goes that's friends, that's people you meet, and especially your family.
Yeah. Now, speaking about family and children and getting into the next generation, you and I had a conversation before about your background musically and how you really like to, pour into kids in that arena of teaching them, arts. And can you talk a little bit about that?
And I will pick out 2 examples. Music it's all encompassing to me, right? And I have one bass student, Armin, and he'll laugh because I mentioned his name. He goes to Gannon University now, but he was wondering how he could open up as a musician, right? So he was learning jazz, but I took the chord theory and just watched him explode. I mean, just the love of it and what he's doing. He's making straight A's, and he's also, I believe, minoring in music. So that makes me really proud. And I'm working right now. A drummer friend of mine, we're working with and I call him a kid. He's the most mature 17-year-old I've ever met. His name's Jake Thomas. Okay. This kid is booking himself 2 and 3 nights a week. He's probably going to school on Monday morning with a giant wad of cash in his pocket that most kids don't have. But he has a bit of an old soul, and working with him and watching him grow and learning that music's not about an ego. It's about sharing something with people and opening them up and making them, when they're having a bad day, they get up and dance, they smile, that type of thing. And I know that sounds corny, but I think that stuff's important.
It is important. So I know you play bass. Mm-hmm. Is there any other instruments? I dabble. Like if I had a piano in front of me, I could probably plink out a few things. Wouldn't be
great.
Okay.
I play a little bit of guitar and I sing.
You sing.
Yeah, but you could tell by my voice being crackly and allergies and stuff, it's not always there.
Okay, well, hey, that's good to know. In case you're ever elected, we need where to come.
Yes, for a charity gig, but if I start sounding like a rooster or a chicken, the allergies are kicking in.
Okay. All right. So tell me, with your background, is that what kind of propelled you to want to run for this office? Was there something else?
I don't want to go too far into this because I don't want to sound negative, but there were some things that happened in that office.
Okay.
Over the past, year or so, and continually, and it just kind of irked me a little bit, and to the fact that when you run an office and you're an elected official, you have a responsibility to maximize the budget, and that budget is taxpayers' money. Anything that's not being done on time, anything that's not being done efficiently, you're wasting taxpayer dollars. And that kind of bothers me a little bit if I don't see. And I think it seems like if you look at certain areas, Washington County seems to be on an upward trend. I think businesses are finding interest in the county, and that's exciting too. So I kind of want to be part of that. You hopping in on this stuff, all great, and having a face and doing these things, all vitally important. But bottom line for me, it's about efficiency. As anyone who's done auditing, efficiency should be the ultimate goal.
Right.
And maximizing the tax dollar.
Yeah. So I think for just an average person out there, the idea of running for office sounds overwhelming.
Whew.
It sounds like
it's we're into second week of April. I've knocked on well over 1,200 doors already. All these different devices to track them and using old spreadsheets and it's a task. But you know what? It's fascinating with that too, because I always welcome when I hand a card out. I have my platform on my card. It says what I'm about, what I've done, and what I believe in. And so if I can get someone to just look at it and talk back, love it, because then you have that interaction. I always ask if I could shake their hand when I'm done. I think that's a different level of communication, right? You've broken that concentric barrier of communication, and you reach people. And I think no matter what you do, you want to reach people in life, because I don't want to sit and just be a guy stuck in a cave. I want to make a difference with people, to people, for people. And cliche as that sounds, that's just how I've lived my life. That's my dad coming through, my late dad coming through in me,
Raised you right.
My dad, my mom, great too, but my dad passed away 5 years ago, and I still little bits and pieces of him every day.
Yeah.
He was that good of a guy.
Yeah. So local to, was it Cannonsburg?
Yeah.
Cannon-Mac area?
Yes. Cannon-Mac, W&J, and then lots and lots of travel. I lived in Peters Township for a while, talking about relationships over the years, but I've thought about, moving other places, but when travel's that easy, there's really no need to move. Mm-hmm. And when work provided me so much travel, I was kind of worn out after.
Yeah. So, going from the private sector into the governmental, an office like this, what would be kind of your apprehensions of what you're going to face? And
I don't go through life with fear. I come in with confidence. I do my homework, and I try to prepare myself for all situations. Now, is that totally possible? Probably not. But this is what I've been blessed with, I think. I learned many years ago to take a breath.
Okay.
Before I react. Take that one breath. And trust me, if people who are super reactionary, you end up getting in trouble, something pops out of your mouth. You take that one breath, your life is so much easier. Not easier, smoother. Not easier, definitely smoother though.
Yeah. So is that, would you say, kind of your philosophy going into this office, if you were to be elected, to just keep it like, let's take a breath, everybody?
100%. And I think you also have to remember, and once again, I when other people have talked to me, and I love this analogy. If we were talking about a ship or a boat, you're going to picture maybe a rowboat or a sailboat. Maybe I'm picturing an aircraft carrier. So that's a huge difference. But yet we're still thinking about something that floats on water. And and I've noticed, and I also and I'll digress just a little bit. We have these two political parties, but there's such differences in each, and then within them, if you only had one, that'd probably split in two. So you have to take that into consideration. That's where the political side of it, because this is more of a true work. This is a job that you have to do efficiently. But there is also the political side of it that you have to be cognizant of, and it's that's something you have to have a thick skin. Politically, if you're going to run for an office, your skin better be thick.
Yeah.
And I'll bring on the arrows. I can take them.
Yeah.
But just be prepared, because I will have done my homework.
Yeah. Gosh, I heard someone say recently that politics is the only sport where you need to wear pads on your back.
It's like, I think in certain situations, it's like you see someone and they're hugging you, but they're sticking a knife in your back. And it's like, and they kind of love you, but at the same time, and politics can be that way.
Yeah.
But I assure you, if I'm elected, that job will be number one. The politics will come second to that job, because once again, we're talking about the taxpayer money.
Yeah.
And there's no way I'm going to let the politics. I will call people out, and I shouldn't say it that way, because from an auditor standpoint, you find there's the findings, and then you go and you present the findings, and you give whoever those findings are going to the opportunity to explain themselves. And a lot of times it's correctable. It was a simple math error. So that's fixed and you move on. But when there's something that's not good, well, then you kind of bark it up the chain a little bit. And that can be ugly, because, and this is where, I think you see those old mob movies where say, it's just business, You don't want to make it personal, but people, I think when people take great pride in their work, they're going to take it a little bit personally, Right. And, you got to watch, because pride could be great, but pride could, can kick your butt sometimes.
Yeah.
But so you just, I think being fair, and I don't want, I try not to bring names in, but Tom Flickinger is just a great guy. He's a rock star, and that man, he does it right.
Our treasurer.
Yeah, he's treasurer. And you got the treasurer, the controller, the two financial positions in the county, and it's weird because I think when you are running for an office, we have the freedom to run for an office, right? But I think for those two positions, you should have to have a financial background, because there could be some really dark days if you don't have a financial background doing that. And that's why, and I've discussed that with him as well. And it can be a little bit scary if you don't have that background.
Yeah. And so for the county, I know that the controller's office has to work with all of the offices, but to your knowledge, is the treasurer's office the office that you're going to be maybe most closely aligned with?
I would say, I think the way of looking at that is kind of maybe sort of.
Okay.
Because, the two financial positions, I always kind of, to simplify it when people ask me, I look at the treasurer as the person who brings the money in. Okay. Tax payments, whatever. The controller, on the other hand, takes that, it takes the money, and they pay the bills, and they audit the other row offices. So it's kind of opposite sides of the T-chart, Okay. Not exactly, but I think that's kind of a simple way of breaking it down.
Now, just for people who may not be aware, because I have no idea, the political sphere or knowledge of people who might listen to this, when you mentioned row offices, is that, if you could explain that, those are the other elected offices? Yes,
the prothonotary, the clerk of courts, the sheriff. Okay. Those are just a few of the row offices.
Okay, so the controller is actually the one at those offices. You're going to be doing the audits of those offices. Okay, so that's a really important job.
It is a very important job, but with saying that, I think you have to watch how you don't want to overcomplicate it. Everything should be scripted. And within scripting of, say, audits and making payments, you always have to look at the changing times and how to better that, make it more accurate using technology, just reading the world, what works best to keep us efficient. we can't come in with chalk on a chalkboard, and just, I'm going to write this one down, Sorry, those days are long past.
Yeah.
So we have to keep moving forward with the times as best as we can and what budgets will allow.
Gotcha. Now, I know you're obviously not in the controller's office right now, but are there some things that you would like to see improvement-wise you're kind of already thinking through?
Yeah, I just, obviously, timely payments, and just, and I think it comes, and this is something this is me as a leader, because I think a lot of people try to get in offices and they try to manage people. I think you should lead people. And there's a difference. There's a big difference, but there, and I've said this before, because sometimes you get on a roll, and you start repeating yourself. I think that when people go to bed on Sunday night, they shouldn't have that uneasy feeling in their stomach. I gotta go to work tomorrow. I don't want that. I want you to come to work. It's not necessarily about being happy, but I want you to feel productive. I don't want you to have anxiety. I think the biggest problem in America is anxiety and lack of self-awareness. So let's eliminate the anxiety, because I'm going to give you no reason to be anxious. And I will work with every single person to make sure that they feel comfortable at work. And I've done that my whole life, in my professional life. And that's crucial to me.
Oh, I'm sure that's reassuring, particularly probably for the people who are working there now, because I think there is a fear that when a new person comes in, they're just going to wipe the board and start over.
That's counterproductive. When there's a large staff, you've got many elements of expertise, and you need to harness that, right? You just say, well, you're all gone. No. That would be horrible, because that would be, for the new person coming in, that would be awful. I'd be like, and then I've got to go through the hiring process. I've got to, adjustments. You have to make adjustments all the time, but that's not always personnel adjustments. Yeah. That's just process.
Right.
Having efficient process in place is vital, because that old saying, running around like a chicken with your head cut off. If you have effective process, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And people are buying into the system. I think that's gone. That's been my experience in life.
Yeah, and I think, just the perspective of government and the trust in government, I would say, is probably at an all-time low, I feel like. With what we're seeing maybe on the national level, where people are just saying, I don't have confidence that things are being done correctly, that money's being handled correctly. A lot of the things that DOJ is uncovering, they just see so much government waste, and the whole system feels corrupt.
I think it always has felt that way to a point. I'm big on, just like auditing. I think we should audit all of our politicians. Especially our state, our representatives and our senators, right? When you go in, you have a salary, and you come out. You spend 30 years in, and you're worth $500 million. Something doesn't add up, and that's probably pretty much lobbyists. But this is why I'm a big fan of term limits. And when Dwight Eisenhower was in office, and the Constitution was changed, and he was the big proponent of that. I wish he would have done it across the board.
I know.
And my theory behind that is this. I mean, for me running, if I come in and I do a great job, I want someone else to learn from that, and then be able to run for it with the same fire, the same vigor, and same want to do the job. If I do it poorly, well, then I shouldn't be in there. But if I could pass that along, I think I should be able to do that in 2 terms.
Yeah.
And leave a big gold star, hopefully.
Yeah.
And then that next person who wants to run, maybe they're in the office, and you work with them.
Yeah.
Because running for a countywide election is immense.
It is.
It's immense.
It is.
And the weird shape of Washington County, you got rivers and then giant hills, little flat areas, and a really eclectic population. It's fascinating. It's an exercise in sociology, psychology, and geography. and history.
Yeah.
And so I think the geek in me likes that too.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So how has it been out there door knocking and campaigning? I mean, that can be rough at times.
Well, I think my legs are getting in better shape. And I Western PA, like the last 10, 15 years, my allergies start kicking in March, and I'm taking selfies. I'm going, look, my eyeballs look like they're out here. And but the work is great because meeting people, because then you get the pulse.
Yeah.
And and I used the word eclectic before. That eclectic group from neighborhood to neighborhood is just, it's fascinating.
Yeah. Tell me any interesting stories you've gotten at a door, perhaps, or when you're out chatting with people.
Here, and I didn't expect it to be 95% engaging. Mm-hmm. And when people, they'll read my card, engage, and you know what? And I always believe, and this is my dad again, if I go to knock on the door and you have a grass yard, you just cut your grass, the grass is wet, it's muddy. If I have to walk all the way around on the sidewalk, that's what I do, because you don't walk through someone's yard they just worked on, Mm-hmm. And I noticed a couple people had stopped me when I was leaving. I talked to them, and I stayed on the cement path. I didn't walk. And one gentleman had said, you know what? I'm voting for you. And I went, oh, well, thank you, because you took the time to walk on my sidewalk and not walk through my yard. And that's just second nature to me. That's respect. Yeah. And you have, if you want to be respected, you can only get that from respecting, And so I found that, a couple of those to be interesting. You do get one or two. It's like, I already know who I'm voting for. And let's go, well, here's my card. Just have a great afternoon,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's there's a dynamic. Mm-hmm. And, but if you can just 1 second, and I always, when I knock on a door, I always have a sticker on, and I'm always holding one of my cards like this, because a lot of people are afraid to answer the door now.
Yeah.
So they're looking, and I'm holding my card, so they know, and I step away from them. I'm not right on the door. I stand back, because I want them to feel safe talking to me.
Yeah.
And I think I've gotten a lot of traction from being that way as well.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, everybody's different. People entering their door in their pajamas, and people, very formal. It's wow, it's amazing.
Yeah. I actually, I feel like door knocking is kind of like an art form.
I agree.
Don't you feel that way? Once you get into it, and you're like, there's really
is a rhythm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and if you've never been a candidate before, I don't think you really understand.
And I think if you could probably tell I'm not shy. If an element of shyness could probably be counterproductive.
Yeah, it's hard.
You have to bring your confidence when you're selling yourself.
Yeah.
And I've always been a we person, not a me person. I think that was the toughest part of engaging, because I'd rather talk about a group that I'm leading than here's me. That's kind of not my style, but you have to be that way when you're door knocking.
Yeah, as a candidate, that's something you really got to be aware of, is that you are promoting yourself, and like for a lot of people, that's not an easy thing. That it's all about me and here's what I've done, but people need to know that.
And just like we're talking now, like we're looking face to face. It's like I think we've both done door knocking.
Yeah.
You can't look at the ground, because that shows no confidence. Mm-hmm. You have to make them understand that what you're saying is what you truly believe in, and that's what I'm delivering. Mm. There's no sugarcoating with me. Excuse me. And I want them to know that I'm going to bat for you.
Yeah.
If you're giving me your vote, you got to trust me, and I'm gonna pay you back on the trust.
Yeah. And for this election coming up, May 20th, it's typically a low turnout election. Getting people to come to the polls is hard on these municipal elections.
Oh, with 4 people in my race in a low turnout.
Yes.
I mean, it's really anybody's game.
It is. So you really have to take advantage of every opportunity you can to get your name out there, get your message out there.
I made one post from about a week ago where I said, I was dry, I was wet, I was dry, I was wet, and then I was dry again. And I'm just soaked to the bone, but it's what you have to do.
You really do. And it's a lot of work, campaigning.
Oh, my God.
So, yeah, thank you for stepping into that.
Sometimes I'm like, did I do the right thing? Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
I know. At the end of the day, when your feet are tired, you're like, am I sure I want to do this? Yeah, yeah.
Question yourself, you know.
Yeah, yeah. That's great, though. So going into Washington County politics, how do you feel that the landscape is for you right now? You know, there's been turmoil in the past with, you know, some of the county politics. It may seem a little bit smoother now. I mean, how do you see this?
You know, it's the understanding of human interaction. You're always going to have, like we started to talk before, you know, people are going to paint their own opinions of situations. And then you throw in, when little groups form, you get the mob mentality behind that. And it's like, oh no, here come the pitchforks, right? Mm-hmm. I don't, you know, in a position like this, I really think that's avoidable. Because this is work, and this is accounting work. And not necessarily even accounting work. It's business work. And I don't think the politics need to be dragged into it. You know, I'd be a watchdog. I'd be an overseer. But you have to be fair. And you can't pick candidates, or you can't pick elected as, I like that person better. I like every audit, every bill you pay has to be the same way.
Yeah.
That's where the true black and white part of a very gray world, you know, that I could make that part black and white.
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue into, you know, just making sure that fairness is there. We talked a little about this in the beginning, about how your brother's the current clerk of courts. And so, like, what do you say in that situation where people wonder about that?
Well, you know, when we were getting petitions signed, it was brought up by a friend of another candidate. And it just made me kind of laugh, because it's something I actually ran by Tom Flickinger as well. And all of my years working, if you have someone that you know, and, you know, like your Group X, you're the chairman of Group X, or you're the manager of Group X, and my team is going to come in and audit you. And we know we're best friends, we're married, whatever. A couple things happen. My group would still audit you. The question is, would I sign off on it? And two things happen. Sometimes in corporations, it's part of it. It's written, it's the process, you sign off on it. If that's not the case, because you want to avoid a potential conflict of interest, you just have Tom Flickinger or someone like that sign off on it. It's one sign off, it's 5 seconds. There is no cost to that, because I've lived it and seen it hundreds of times over the years. And that's really a non-event.
Yeah. And so, with Tom being, you know, like a strong ally for you in that office, do you feel like he's somebody that you could kind of come to with certain issues? Or?
Yeah, and I think, and I don't want to be over mentioning Tom, I just think Tom is a level-headed, interesting, pragmatic, practical human being. And in a position like that, pragmatic and practical, number one.
Right.
You know, you can't be chaotic, because chaos and money numbers do not mix. You will be hammered in the long run over that. Yeah. So that's when I bring Tom's name up. It's that level of respect because of his pragmatism.
Gotcha.
You know, he's just, and he just always kind of goes like that.
Yes.
And listen, we need that.
Yes. And I think that's something that taxpayers, that they want to see, is that the office is just being run well.
Consistent and transparent.
Yes. Particularly when it comes to money.
Yes, and you can't, you know, when you've got the big overcoat on and you open the overcoat and you got warts, you got to explain the warts. And it's, and like I said, that's why going in with a level head, with taking that breath, not being overly reactionary.
Yeah.
You know, I think we need to be a little more proactive and less reactive.
Yeah.
I think that's a life statement, not just, you know, for an office.
So do you feel like that's something that you'll really be able to bring to that office?
I can assure you 100% yes. Because I've worked my entire life at learning how to work with people, learning to not be overly, you know, reactionary, and you know, and just keeping this demeanor that I have, because I barely breathed the whole time I was here. but that's me, and I'm not afraid. Here I am. Come talk to me.
Yeah.
Anytime. I will be, like I said, I will be transparent.
Yeah. And I think voters can see that. I think voters know when somebody is faking it, or when somebody's just being genuine about who they are, when they are being transparent, when they're trying to, be a bit plasticky and...
That just doesn't exist in my body. And I don't mean that to be a braggart. I've worked to not be that person.
Yeah.
It's important to be a human being.
Yes.
It's important to not just try to please everyone. And that's the other thing, I think, in political positions. Excuse me. You have so many different opinions running around that I see people trying to please everyone.
Yeah.
Dangerous.
Yeah.
Because you end up losing yourself.
Absolutely.
Becoming 800 different things. You lose your focus, and you lose you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's, at the end of the day, it's your soul, right? All you have is your soul. I don't care if you're rich or poor. It's all you got is your soul.
Yeah.
So you own your soul. Hold on to it. You want to share it? Great. But you own your soul.
Oh, that's a really good point, because I think, the professional politicians out there are just so good at selling themselves and manipulating the situation
And
to be
soulless sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people are so turned off by that.
I think because of technology, because of social media and whatnot, I think there's always good and bad, right? But it's also given voters that transparent eyeball to look at things, and I'm quoting, I think, Ralph Waldo Emerson there, and maybe I shouldn't. To the ability to look, just like we should look at ourselves, right?
Yeah.
But we now have an easier mechanism to look at other things and say, something doesn't smell right here, and and then take proper action to fix it.
Yeah, yeah, and because we're in this age now where we have all this access to technology, where we can be really doing our homework on candidates, I feel like it's become that much more important to actually know exactly who that person is. And we can't know everything about you.
Exactly.
But we can really try our best to get a gauge of who you are.
Which is the main reason, and deliberately transparent. This is me. And I have no qualms about who I am. I'm good in my skin. I try to do good for other people, first and foremost in life. And that's big to me. And being in office, I'd be the same way. It's not like I'm worried about letting people down, but I'm worried about, I think I'm worried maybe it is worried about letting people down, but I want them to get the most of what they spent, and that's a vote on me. And I want them to have that value.
Yeah.
And that's super important.
Yeah, yeah.
I take that personally,
Yeah, well, it is. I mean, your voice is your vote.
Yep.
And it's precious, and many people have fought and died for us to have that right. And
way too many, and it's just that level of respect for that alone, gives you that extra juice to do the job in the best way that you can.
Absolutely, absolutely. To do it well and to always be honoring and serving the people.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes as Americans we get stuck between, are we us or are we a bunch of me's? And I think that we got to be careful with that as well, because collectively we're a pretty wonderful group. Although we're all different, I think we're a pretty wonderful group that has been unmatched in history.
I agree.
And we've got to try to keep that going.
Yeah, we have something special here in America, and I feel that we are on the right track right now. But these last couple years have been.
It's wow. We talk about technology, those things. There's that wonderful thing about technology, but it also gives us that bully pulpit. It's really kind of unnecessary.
Yes.
Yes. Listen, if you want to argue with me, here I am. You don't need to try to book me, or anyone for that matter, online, because I think that's kind of cowardly.
Yeah.
Do
you have a Facebook page for the campaign?
I do. I do have Pat Phillips for Washington County Controller.
Okay.
I try to work both my my Pat Phillips Facebook page, which ties into my Instagram. Yeah, wow, look how holy cow! No. As well as my controller page, and I'm trying to run them all in a similar fashion during this process.
Okay, so if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, if they had some more questions, is that a good place to
Yeah,
reach out to?
an IM is the perfect way to get a hold of me, and I will gladly answer any questions. Everything I have, I've put out online. What I believe, what my platform is. Question me, please. I welcome it. I will gladly answer anything you have, and just because I believe in what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I think just having that open door policy where people can come and they hear something and they say, what's going on with that, or where do you stand on this, and I think that knowing that option is even available.
Yeah.
That they don't have to feel like, is that kind of odd to reach out to them, like you're saying no, please.
Here I am.
Yeah.
If you ever see me out playing music, stop when I get off stage. Come talk to me. I'll talk. Listen. And because life fascinates me, and like I said, it could be anything: the history, the science, whatever. I love to just wax philosophic about life because we only got one. It could be long, it could be short, and so it should be interesting, right?
Yes. So are you still playing a lot? Or?
Yeah, people say, do you have any vices? And yeah, I'm going to get I have two vices. I have a gun collection, and I have a giant guitar collection. So.
Okay. Very good.
And on the gun side, it's the mechanisms, it's the history, it's how the things tick and work. Plus, it reminds me of my grandfather. When I used to go hunting with my grandfather when I was a kid, and so anytime I do that, or if I go fishing, it's like going back with my grandfather.
Yes.
And he was big with my music too. I didn't know my grandfather actually played a little bit of bass. I didn't find that until that.
Wow.
But when I was 15, and my younger brother, who was a guitar player, we would play in the basement, and we stunk. We were awful, and ear bleeding loud. My grandfather would sit there between all that cacophony and just smile, and that resonates still with me today. And that's those little positive things in life that you don't even have to say, that people can learn, and because not everyone's happy, right? Yeah. But if you could learn and teach and learn to have people dig a little bit deeper. Life on the surface, that's kind of bland and plain, but dig down a little bit and you really find what a person is made out of. And I think that's kind of where the excitement in life is.
Yeah.
And music does it. Music helps bring that out. It's a tool for it. I warn you though, I do make crazy bass faces when I play.
So just be prepared for that.
Be prepared.
When we come see you.
I'm completely unaware that I'm doing it.
Okay.
I'm not Godzilla, but look like him a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, we'll remember this.
And I also believe, as serious as life is, as serious as work and politics is, there's got to be a little levity too.
Yeah.
You got to be able to laugh a little bit, especially at ourselves. We got to laugh at oneself.
Yes.
And I pick on myself all the time.
Well, the controller's office seems to be a very, I don't want to say high stakes because it's not high stakes, but it's just very crucial to make sure that office in particular runs very well.
It has to, because by running that office well, all of the other offices you're keeping their ducks in a row.
Yes.
And when that happens, life is good.
Yeah. Yes.
All the ducks are lined up.
That's right.
And if the ones that aren't, well, let's straighten them. And metaphors. I love metaphors. So it's that's making it a lot simpler than it is. But ultimately, that is what it is.
You may not know this. Just a question that I had. Whenever you go out into one of these other row offices and you're doing an audit there, does that audit report go to them first and they have a chance to rebut, perhaps?
In the auditing world, I've seen times where there have been surprise audits.
Okay.
But within the county, there should be a script for that. They should know. And then you look for the anomalies. When you find the anomalies, you report the anomalies back. And then you work on that and you find out why that's there.
Okay.
And then if it's wrong, you come up with a corrective action.
Okay.
And then, because basically, when you're a controller in government, that you're going to have to be audited by the state as well. So once again, your ducks better be lined up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So there's that aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people remember the issue that we had here in Washington County with Frank Scandell going back, where there was all that money and.
Yeah, I actually went to high school with him.
Really?
Yeah, and that was a heartbreaker.
Yeah.
That was a heartbreaker.
It was, and I think people were probably thinking like, how did that even happen? How did that even go on?
It shouldn't have, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But and how do you hide that much money? That's.
Yeah.
That's why when you, as a controller, catch that, that's why you go right into okay, here's the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't they? And then you go into corrective action mode. Unless they could prove it right there that, we misplaced this here, it was a decimal point, those types of things.
Gotcha.
But you, and you got to run it up the flagpole.
Yeah, something like that. It needs to go up the flagpole.
Yeah, sure. It's. I mean, ultimately, that's tragic.
Yeah, it is.
It's tragic.
It is. So, yeah, controller's office, very, very important. All right, what maybe didn't I ask you about that you may have wanted to share?
I think you covered everything, because I really wanted to talk about my history.
Okay.
I wanted to talk about my passion.
Mm-hmm.
Just how I really and I believe in the good of good. So we've covered most of that, and I just say I'm thankful, I'm grateful for you having me here today.
We're very happy to have you. Now, this is the lightning round.
Oh
Okay,
no!
Are you ready? Ready for the lightning round? Okay. Beach or mountains?
I'm a fly fisherman and an ocean fisherman.
Okay.
Wow. You know what? I'm gonna slightly 51% mountain.
Okay. All right. Coffee or tea?
Man, like you can tell, I try to find middle ground, right? It depends on the day. Lately it's been coffee, but there are times I just go total tea, and I do different types of tea, not just standard, pico tea, but
Yeah.
I'll get a little adventurous with,
Okay.
my dad used to say foo-foo tea.
Okay. I'm a teetotaler, so we could chat. Favorite restaurant?
Lots of them. There's a place in Clearwater, Florida, called Four Ladies, and they make ossobuco. It's old school Italian, and your mouth starts watering as you go in. That I really love. Angelo's here in Washington. Man, the best meat. Maybe I consider myself a meatball chef. I love to cook, but man, Angelo's makes unbelievable meatballs. There's something about simplicity that makes it wonderful,
Yeah.
And I recommend Angelo's meatballs if you.
All right. Your no-miss morning ritual.
I think that's evolved over the years. I think now I like when I get up, I like a little bit of just some quiet time before I move on with the day. If I'm not working or on vacation, sometimes I'll just get on my ATV and go take a ride. Mm-hmm. Little things like that. It's about peace of mind, knowing that I'm good within me for the day.
Yeah.
So those types of things. Maybe it's that coffee. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Last question. This might be hard for you. Your favorite song?
Okay. This is going to be weird because, there is a song called Blue and Green by Miles Davis. Okay. And I'm an old blues and jazz fan as well. And there could be a number of classic rock or modern songs, but Blue and Green is just, you could listen to where it's elements of jazz and blues coming together. But when you close your eyes, it has a darkness to it, yet an element of peace to it. Mm-hmm. So you can just close your eyes, and it's just an amazing piece of music.
Okay. Well, Pat Phillips, thank you so much
for
coming in today.
I greatly appreciate it.
With us. And thank you so much just for being here and letting the taxpayers, the voters, see a little bit of glimpse into who you are and what your candidacy is all about. So
the candid candidate, right?
Yes, Absolutely. Thank you again.
Oh, you're welcome. And thanks to you too for doing your work.